Well, thank you, everyone. This is just a wonderful sharing. I like the way we're doing this. And Dr. Baker, you impressed me greatly. I really enjoyed hearing more and more about something that has moved me already. Our Creator God, we ask that at this time we might sum up our thoughts, our hopes, maybe put our attitude in a little different place, and be empowered to do what we can in small ways to make Washington County, the greater metropolitan area, and the world a better place. Amen. Our lives are fraught in so many ways, big and small, mostly small if we're honest. We wake up on a given day with the best intentions, right? We have 3 things we want to do before lunch, and what happens? Well, the dog has spent the night throwing up, right? So there's the cleaning up and taking the rug to the laundromat that has a big enough washer and dryer to deal with it. And well, maybe we ought to take the dog to the vet because she's just not getting any better. So by noon, right, you haven't completed one thing you set out to do. In fact, you feel like you've fallen behind. And once again, life has happened. Fred Craddock has said, if you're going to have any joy, any purpose, any peace, you're going to have to put it together out of fragments because you are not going to get 24 smooth hours in a row. It does not work that way. But the wonderful thing about it is that the Bible understands that. Jesus himself understood that. The Bible was not written by some relaxed person all lathered up with sunscreen under an umbrella by the beach drinking lemonade. The Bible was written by people who had to put life together with short pieces of string. I like that image. Jesus knew that, said Fred Craddock. So this parable is the perfect example of that. Here is a man or a woman who go out to sow. Some seed falls on the path, and before it could germinate, sparrows come along and they gobble it. And then she spreads some seed on shallow soil, and it springs up, but it has no depth, so it succumbs quickly to the elements. Some seed falls among weeds, and the weeds choke it out, but some of the seed, a small percentage, falls on good soil and produces abundantly, nature being so tenacious. And then Luke gives its interpretation about how we are all different kinds of soils. Some of us are like the hard path, we're stubborn to the end. Some of us are shallow, sad that the Kardashians are finally going off the air. Some of us are like the weedy ground, we run with the wrong crowd and it does us no good. But really, seriously, all Luke had to work on was the first part of the parable as we have it. The collections of sayings of Jesus that we have don't give interpretations like this business about the different places, how it all works and who the people are that represent the soils. The churches of the first century came up with those interpretations and added them on. And this one's from Luke's church. His church wanted to answer the question, why doesn't the preaching in this church make more of a difference? And the answer seems only a few people really seem predisposed to listen, which gets the preacher off the hook. But it shouldn't, I think. Anyway, without the explanations of Luke's church added on, I would say that the bare parable as it came from Jesus himself, without the silly interpretation, is just saying this, and it needs no embellishment. Hey, spread your seed liberally. For heaven's sake, don't go out and place it selectively. You never know when and whether it's going to prosper. Different people react differently to what is offered to them depending on the day and the weather and their circumstances. You just never know. So sow liberally. When I was really young, I thought of going into public school teaching. I think half the people at this church were public school teachers or were public school teachers at one time. Well, a wise professor at the University of Washington told me, teachers have to be content with sowing the seed, not with reaping. 99 times out of 100, you don't see the benefit of what you've invested. And it's the same with preaching, though. You scatter the seed, ideas, wisdom of the world's religions and Jesus, and you don't know what's going to happen. Some folks want more of a return. We all want more of a return at times. I remember my first year of ministry, I was close friends with a doctor, and I watched enviously as he gave people such clear-cut help day after day. Well, I made my peace with the kind of sowing I do. You toss out what you have and trust that God and the creation will use it in a good way. So I preach these sermons, I teach my classes, I write my occasional op-eds, send essays and poems to magazines, and it amounts to just tossing ideas out into the wind. But you have to be okay with that. It's the way Jesus recommended. The same is true of pastoral care. Sometimes Don and I do things of immense benefit to people, and we know nothing about it. For example, a lot of years ago, when I was a student pastor in tiny Myrtle Point, Oregon, we were decorating the church for Christmas. There were just, 40 people, maybe 50 in that church. And when somebody is missing for an event like greening the church, you know who it is. So I called this woman in the church. Her name was Jean. She was about 82 at the time. And I told her she was missed, and I went over and picked her up with her agreement and brought her back to church. And 3 years later, she drove 2 hours to attend my ordination service in Eugene. And during the reception, she took me aside to tell me something. She said, "You really helped me once." I said, How did I do that? She said, "Remember that night when you called me to help hang the greens for Christmas?" Well, she said, "I decided before that at 82, I was too old to do stuff. I would stay home after dark. I'd only go out, in fact, for groceries and the doctor and church on Sunday morning and no more. But I had such a nice time that evening, I decided I'd been premature. So," she said, "I went to my doctor and told him I'd try those gold treatments for my arthritis that he'd recommended. And they worked. So I signed up for a cruise, and I met this man, and we got married last year." All from a little phone call saying, "Gene, you're missed." We cast our seeds and words, and 999 out of 1,000, go nowhere. Especially those we spend time, placing just right. And then what ends up coming up is of such surprise. That's what the parable is saying. So we need to make our peace with that. This is just Jesus talking about how life is ordered. We need to trust serendipity. When you take a little extra time with somebody at your work, going the extra mile for them, they don't rush over and make you Employee of the Year, do they? And if you make a special visit to one of the kids on your block who's in Little League and you help him with his batting, Scott Pelley from 60 Minutes is not going to come over with a crew and do a piece on you. But you've done something worth doing. And you've probably done it well. Even if you don't know whether, what you offered will mean anything to anyone in the long run. It may well be that most of the seeds we plant get wasted and amount to nothing. But who cares? A particularly successful friend of mine, to go back to the teacher image I used earlier, a particularly successful pastor friend of mine once said that he remembered one line a teacher had said to him in all 4 years of high school. One thing. This teacher of history said to him, life is too short not to risk everything and live boldly. Life is too short not to risk everything and live boldly. He said that stuck with him, and no words have ever been more helpful or more formative of him in his whole life. Don't be timid. Invest yourself. Seeds get planted and they come up on their own schedule, if at all. Our job is just to spread the seed and not to worry over it. Now here's one more thing that I think is crucial. It's been said that if you find it impossible to do something you're trying so hard to do, don't keep banging your head against the wall. Find another way to fulfill whatever that impulse is in you. For example, you work hard to get your father to love you. You work and you give and you give and you try and nothing. But you might adopt a sweet old widower on your street and have him over for dinner, and he might become the surrogate grandfather to your kids you always hoped your dad would be. So liberally. Mother Teresa once said, "The failure is the kiss of Jesus." I think that goes together with finding somebody else to love your kids. Failure is the kiss of Jesus. In this context, I take that to mean that failure can release you to spread your seed somewhere else a little more widely, a little more godly maybe too. This is in fact where Foundation Sunday comes in, I think. Our Southminster Foundation is a place where we find imaginative ways. If you heard from Dave what this money is doing, it has to do with imagination. It's a place where we find imaginative ways to do good in the lives of people we've never met, but are so happy to connect with. It gives us fresh opportunity. It opens our hearts and our eyes. Most of the parable of the seed speaks of seed that failed, but, I ask you, is this a parable of failure or a parable about success? You can actually read it either way. It all depends on what you're looking for. Some of us, I'm afraid, are better at seeing the failure side of life, the seed that didn't come up, than the success side, which is meager. Maybe the miracle, though, is that by the sheer grace of God, some of the seed took hold at all. Because, one realization that what you offered someone really mattered to them can carry you a long way in this life. I mean, it has to. Think of it. Jesus impressed thousands on this earth. But after his death and resurrection, it was a literal handful of people who made it last. He cast a tremendous amount of seed going all over the region of the Galilee and further, but it only took root in a very few people. But that was all that was needed. The important thing was that some of it came up at all. 80% of life, said a New York comic. 80% of life is just showing up. You do it and you read and you leave the rest to luck, fortune, serendipity, providence, whatever you want to call it. So the parable says we need to cast our seed out there, but not to be so invested in specific outcomes that we can't see what really happens with what we have to offer. We are going to be surprised if we pay attention. Mother Teresa also said this: few are called to do great things, but all of us can do small things with great love. Life consists, of mostly small opportunities, as I said in the beginning. Most of us this week will not speak to the nation about Black Lives Matter, or write a book, or end a war, or appoint a cabinet, or dine with the Queen, which Joe Biden's doing right now, I guess, or convert a nation, or be burned at the stake, thank God. More likely this week will present no more than a chance to give a cup of cold water, write a note, visit a nursing home, cast a single vote to keep the library open, right? Help with our youth, share a meal with a new friend, tell our grandkids a story, go to choir practice, feed the neighbor's cat, invest in our foundation. In doing these things, though, we pour out our life like the Apostle Paul did. He called it a libation. We fight the good fight. We finish the race. That's how we keep the faith. One day, one small act of love at a time. Amen.